Well, I want to welcome everybody to the Techland studios. I am joined by a a group of people that have lots of big ideas and big thoughts in the world of theater and theater education. Very intelligent folks that you could literally say have seen it all between all six of us. So, and maybe just one person has seen it all, but we'll give value to everyone else. But I want to go around the table first here and introduce the two that are sitting with me and get a little bit of an introduction from each individual on why should we be listening to these people sitting around or on Zoom. So first I want to start with Mr. Paul Copenhaver.
Hi, I'm Paul Copenhaver. I'm a theater consultant with W.J.H.W. I have been working in the theater industry since I was a freshman in college. I have worked as a theatrical installer. I've worked as a tech theater teacher in the high school setting. I've worked as a sales rep for a theatrical manufacturer and installer, and now I'm a theater consultant.
And then the generous Erich Campbell, who's allowing us to be in this Techland studio. Erich, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yep, my name is Erich Campbell. I'm the general manager of Techland Houston and Costume Works. Techland Houston is the company that would come out and install your audiovisual systems, your lighting, your video, your rigging, your curtains and whatnot. We're also the same company that does the service calls. We go into those spaces and we train. We teach those directors and those students how to use that equipment, and we also do the professional development throughout the course of the year. So we're sort of the guys that are on that ground level in your schools, doing the hands-on and making sure that along the way after the install and the design has been done, that all of that sort of pays off.
Great. And then just because it's how it is on the screen, Erich Friend.
Hi, I'm Erich Friend with Technical Systems. We're a theater consulting company. And my background is I started out doing live shows, touring. I got some good experience with multiple venues that way, and then went on to work at a theater consulting company in Texas. Learned a lot about the trade. Spent some time working with a installation company doing lighting and sound installation as an engineer there, and worked with a company that did lighting for film and television. So you learn a whole different aspect of how lighting works different from the theatrical, and went back into the consulting business. And I've generally been in the industry for about 45 years.
Wow. Kristi.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kristi Ross-Clausen. Theaterhealthandsafety.com is the website, which has a little bit more information about me. But in a nutshell, I'm an IATSE stagehand and Actors Equity stage manager. I've been a K-12 teacher. I'm now teaching at 2 different universities at the same time, which I think is probably the silliest thing I've ever done. But it's great because there's a big need for knowledge about technical theater and health and safety, and particularly in the school systems. So that's the area that I focus on. I go and do inspections, I do consulting, I help design systems. My day job is for an AV company and I help them with quality management. I write the CTS questions. We'll talk a little bit more about CTS later. I'm part of that committee. So a little bit of everything when it comes to the technical side of stuff. Basically, if it's happened backstage, I've done it at some point in time.
And then Dan.
I could probably just repeat Kristi and be pretty darn close. I started with IATSE Local 31 when I was a junior in high school. That was May of 2000, so you can do the math there. I have a bachelor's in technical theater and design, and I have a master's in occupational safety management, which is a bit unusual in this industry. I have the CTS and certification for audio video, the ETCP entertainment electrician and theater rigging certifications, and the graduate safety professional designation, and probably a few others I can't even think of. CPR instructing. I've been a ski patroller for 15 years.
OSHA 10, OSHA 30.
Yeah, all that stuff.
Yeah, I think all of us have that.
And then I've also been a ski patroller. So I got with the technical standard group at ESTA and even helped write some of the medical emergency response standards that have just recently been adopted as well.
Great. Wow. Oh man. Okay. You guys, I teach theater. Anyway, welcome. So I want to start with, and this is a heavy topic, and you know, there are a variety of teachers out there that will jokingly talk about OSHA in their classroom, and it's almost it almost becomes kind of a tongue-in-cheek joke with some students when they put the ladder on top of the table so that they can reach whatever it is they're trying to reach, and they say, hey, make sure we're not taking pictures, we don't want OSHA to find out, you know, those types of things. And I'm sure we have all stood on a rolling chair at some point in our life just to change a light bulb in a house or something like that. But I want to talk about OSHA. I want to talk about the importance of it and the knowledge that they also supply to not just theater educators, but, you know, just pretty much anybody that that wants to find out safety protocol that they sort of mandate, I guess, if you will. I want to shoot to Erich Friend first to ask about about OSHA, because I know you have some examples of code books. They are not all necessarily OSHA, but they are things that you want to include in your sort of library of rules and regulations that maybe educators and teachers and even administrators want to make sure they have on the shelf so that they can talk with the proper terminology. So Erich, if you want to speak on that real fast.
Yeah, there's the OSHA guides and regulations are available online. They are also available as a print item, but it's a heavy, big book, and I'm not even sure the government's printing them anymore because it changes so rapidly. At one time I had one, it was about as thick as a New York City phone book. But understanding where to find your resources so you can quote them accurately and understand the actual wording is really important. So going to the OSHA.gov website is one resource. Going to the National Fire Protection Association website, nfpa.org, is very important because that's where you can find the Life Safety Code 101, NFPA 204, which is a standard for smoke and heat venting that covers your smoke vents over your stage. NFPA numbers 70, which is the National Electric Code, which affects all the wiring that you do over the stage, is important, as well as the NFPA 80, which is the standard for fire doors and other opening protectives, which includes your fire curtain. So all of these books that affect how you use your space, that information is available to you, reasonably affordable, certainly available online for free if you want to use that resource that way. But having the documents in front of you where you can go through, read them, they're great to help put you to sleep at night. But once you've highlighted the things that you see that directly affect your operations in your theater, you can use those to communicate that specific, accurate information to other stakeholders in your facility. So a lot of times people don't want to believe you that there's a rule that says X, Y, Z. So being able to quote it chapter and verse is very important. The other thing I want to point out is that OSHA is different in each state. There is a federal plan OSHA, and a state plan OSHA. And it affects whether in different states, it affects whether or not public schools are covered under OSHA regulations. Either way, if you have a private school, like a private university or a religious school, you are under OSHA requirements in those private situations. So what's important is that you don't know where the students are going to end up with their jobs. They get a summer job at an amusement park or in another theater. OSHA applies in those circumstances. So whether you are specifically covered under OSHA is really something to just not address in the classroom, to just inform the students about OSHA and OSHA regulations and help them understand that every job they will have, with the exception of working in a public school in a federal plan state, will put you under OSHA. If you go out and work in the live entertainment industry, you'll be under OSHA. So understanding all those regulations, whether they specifically apply to you or not, is very important.
Part of part of that too is even if you as a public school employee are not covered, there are going to be people that come into your space who are covered. So when I'm working for my AV company, I'm covered by OSHA. And if I'm working in a public school, that school needs to meet the OSHA standards. So it's just good to use it everywhere.
I'll also point out that while an individual might not be under OSHA specifically, chances are they're under an insurance company, and the insurance company wants those same standards to apply to all the people, whether they're under OSHA or not, or their standards are so similar that if you're following the OSHA standard, they'll be happy.
So I want to throw it to these guys at the table real fast, since both of you, both of you go in after the fact sometimes, but when you go in, and I know all of you on the screen do installs as well, and sort of help with, well, not installs, but
Eric doesn't.
you help, yeah, you can help design a space and help, give recommendations on a space. So when you go into a space, after the fact, after it's been built and done and completed, where do you speak up? Where do you say to a space that has already been built, not your space, not your consulting, not your work, but you have now been called in to, they want an upgrade in lighting. They want, same for you as well. They want a new sound system. Where do you speak up to say, hey, this has been out of compliance for however long you've had it, and do you say something to them, even if it has nothing to do with the job that you have to complete?
Go ahead. Yes, absolutely. Because if we as consultants walk into that space and we see something and we don't mention it, then we still have liability.
Got
that we didn't bring it up while we were in the space.
Okay.
That's exactly right. It's a good point, because the problem there is in those situations when there are incidents, things happens, there's a tendency in schools to point the finger.
Yeah.
Somebody came through and they never told us it was bad.
Got it.
We sort of live with that liability. It's a daily thing. So I think that, I think in every case, whether you're there for that specific subject, that's not the issue. You bring it up, you call attention to it, just in hopes that they, take that seriously and there's a remedy there. And sometimes it falls on us to write the plan for how it needs to be remedied. Sometimes just raising the red flag and saying, hey, this is terrible. In most cases, the director doesn't know the solution. You've got to not only point it out, but you've also got to walk them to getting it fixed.
Yeah. So what do you, and Kristi, I'll go to you on this first.
Sure.
Where do you, and Dan, pardon me for asking, but where are you? What state are you in?
Oh, I'm up in Missouri.
Okay.
And I'm in Wisconsin.
I knew Kristi. I think we could all tell. Anyway, but
Sorry.
But so Kristi, where do you when you walk into a space, or excuse me, not when you walk into a space, I just asked that. When you are what do you recommend? Let me back up. Let me English better. What do you recommend for an educator that might not know their space or what is out of compliance, not necessarily with OSHA, but with also other codes and such? Who do you recommend they call? And it's not a company, just what type of person should they call to bring into a space that can kind of almost tick off, here's something that's wrong, here's something that's wrong, that kind of thing. Who do you think we should call?
This is such a highly specialized area of study. You are looking at three, and I'd say there's maybe 2 or 3 more people in the country that I would call. If you're in Texas, give Erich a call. He's right there. If you're in the middle of the world, Dan's right there. If you're up North Central, give me a call. If you're out on the East Coast, Bill Sapsis has guys that go out and do it. If you're out on the West Coast, Utah, I can't think of the name of the company in Utah, but call the person who's local to you, because you're going to want to establish a relationship. And if we go back in 5 years, 10 years, we're going to keep documentation of the buildings that we've gone into so we can do some comparison. None of us know it all. None of us. And we call each other, we call our friends, we call experts that we know so that we help each other out. So if you're a high school teacher, you're a school teacher, you're in a house of worship, whatever, and you say, I'm not sure, call somebody. We're here to help you.
How do I know you're the right person? Not you specifically. How do and anybody can take that, but I could market myself as this all-knowing genius tech theater guy.
You could. You
Yeah.
could.
But-
I've got my master's is on theater safety in high schools. Dan's got a degree specifically on occupational safety. Erich, 30 years, 40 years, he's been doing this for forever. You want
45.
somebody who's been doing this for a long time.
So Dan, you were about to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say, I find a lot of value in certifications by our trade organizations. So based on whatever subject matter you're working with at the time, there's probably a certification for it. And some of them are really hard. ETCP is one of the challenging ones, but you get some really good riggers with the ETCP theater rigging certification. CTS is for audio video. The CSP, GSP, a couple others, those are for safety. Look towards people that have the credentials, because now you have a independent organization who's put a committee together that says, these are the things that somebody needs to know. And now this person has demonstrated that. And at least at the point that they took the test, they knew everything within the criteria. So that is the litmus test that I tell people is when you want the expert, find somebody who's certified, you want somebody who's done it 500 times before they step foot in your venue. Yeah. And it's like, you don't want a heart surgeon. You don't want to be the first patient with a heart surgeon when they're right by themselves. No, you want the doctor who's done it. And if they have a resident, great, but you want somebody who's done it. Same thing with certifications. You want somebody who has the credentials, has somebody else saying this person knows what they're doing.
So Erich, friend, can you give me a handful of certifications that you feel a theater educator, not necessarily, not an IATSE, not somebody like that, but do you have a handful of certifications that you feel would be feasible? Because I know the rigging one, I've looked into that to become certified in rigging, and I know how extensive it is time-wise to do that. Are there a handful of them that you would recommend that are feasible for an educator to get and that would help them become more aware in their own space?
I think probably like the first one would be first aid. Go get your first aid class, get your AED training. These are the things, you got to be the first responder. You're right there where the accident happened. You want to obviously do things to prevent accidents from ever happening. But as far as skill training, that would be the very first to get. The ETCP rigging training, electrical training are very good. You're teaching people how to use your rigging system if you have one, and you're using electricity in the theater. Understanding the requirements of handling that electricity is important. That said, it's boring, but getting the NFPA code books for these things is helpful. It helps identify the different parts of your building you need to pay attention. Crowd manager certification, it's relatively easy to get. Understand how many people need to be present for an event and what their training needs to be so that you can manage your facility. The other teachers that use your facility should obviously also have that crowd management training. You want to be able to help guide everyone in case of some sort of an emergency or an accident. And that's what that training's for. Your OSHA training, your basic OSHA 10-hour class, helps you understand the purpose of OSHA and what classifications of training are out there. There's a lot more OSHA training than an OSHA 10, but that's a basic 10-hour course. There are specialists that teach the OSHA 10 with a orientation towards theater. It's a generic industry safety. So the people that run cranes on a construction site and the guy that runs the jackhammer on a construction site, they also need OSHA 10. But there are a few people that have tailored that under OSHA's blessing for the theater environment so that the wording of things is relevant to the audience.
The Event Safety Alliance has an OSHA 10 and an OSHA 30 that are tailored to the live events industry that are very good. And for high school teachers, the National Federation of State High School Associations, yes, I know that's a mouthful, but if you look up nfhs.org, in their educational programming, they have a 2.5-hour online theater safety class that anybody can take for free. And that's fabulous for teachers at any age level, and also high school students certainly can handle that content.
You know, the Event Safety Alliance has their Event Safety Access webinar, and it is a small cost. It's not terrible, but it's actually a really good webinar. I did it in an afternoon, and there's some good information in there as well that's broken down into bite-sized chunks for anybody in the industry.
I want to second that Event Safety Alliance organization and their documents that they have. It's a very comprehensive. It was originally developed for the live production industry after a series of very tragic events that happened a few years back, but it has been rounded out and it really addresses everything that we do in a small theater environment as well as a large concert environment. So the Event Safety Guidebook is a real good investment of your time, and certainly worthy. Any of these manuals are worthy of having your students do special assignments, little homework assignments. You don't have them make a report on the whole book, have them make a report on one little subject matter.
Right. Paul?
Yeah, I was going to jump in. So you talked a little bit about codes, and Erich has talked about NFPA standards. The other thing that you want to look at are the ANSI standards, and those are all listed on the ESTA works website. So there are ESTA standards for theatrical lighting, for mechanical hoisted rigging, counterweight rigging. All of those standards are available and are something that you should be familiar with. If I'm not mistaken, there's actually one of those ESTA standards lists, like if you were going to do a rigging inspection, things that you can look for to do an inspection in your own space.
So great transition. It's almost like we planned this.
Almost.
So I want to move on to rigging. You know, there are a lot of spaces that still have 30, 40-year-old counterweight systems that have either never been inspected or not been inspected enough. I want to get a couple of simple look-fors in a rigging system that are red flags, immediate red flags. You know, there are, you know, obviously taped together ropes, I hope, is a red flag for everybody. I don't know if that exists, but I hope not. But yeah, well, there you go. But you know, some people, their ropes are extreme. They don't have any tension on them, that kind of thing. You can go and it whips back and forth, and that's kind of a tell of certain issues. Knots are hand tied. You can tell if a knot is was either fixed by somebody that had no idea what they were doing, or, you know, had some E-tape thrown around it. But what are some immediate look-fors? Dan, I want to go to you first. I don't think I've gone to you first yet. I'll put you on the spot first, and then we'll go around.
Well, my big pet peeve is wire rope clips, and I can't even go into at least a venue and see one somewhere in their system that someone's just put it on backwards. Or if they have it alternating where they go one way, one the other. I'm like, why? That defeats the whole purpose of a wire rope clip. I actually don't like to see them at all in systems because people screw them up so bad. I'll take the sleeves whenever I specify them. But that is one of my biggest pet peeves, is people installing them incorrectly. After that, it really comes down to, you know, when you run the lines, do you hear something squeak? Does something move when it shouldn't move? Does it not move when it should move? Is it clean? And I say, is it clean, because that gives you an overall health of your system. If it is clean, you can look and your knots are going to be well maintained, properly whipped, and just in really good shape. Where if it's not clean, all right, maybe the ends are all tattered and they're all out, but it's going to be so indicative of other problems in your system that if your place is clean, you're just going to start seeing stuff and looking at it going, man, you know, I don't know this. I'm not a subject matter in this, but I do know this doesn't look right. I better call somebody. And
Okay, Kristi?
Yeah, cleanliness is a big thing. If you keep your stage floor clean and you walk in one morning and there's a square shaped nut in the middle of the floor, you can pretty much assume that there's something going on in the rigging. And I had that happen to me when I was teaching once. So, but if you don't have your floor clean, it's a very simple thing. You know, we're talking a broom. We're not talking about making a major investment. It's a broom and 10 minutes of your time to keep that floor swept. But you can tell a lot about what's going on. Also, rust. If your fire hatch doors up above don't seal properly, things will be rusty. And as things get moved, you'll see the rust particles falling down on the floor. So I second everything Dan said and add on, look for the cleanliness in the middle of the floor.
Erich, friend?
Well, I want to precursor the cleanliness. If you're having somebody come to look at your systems, don't clean up first. Go ahead and leave it a mess for that first inspection, because what we find in that mess can be telltale signs of problems. If you've cleaned everything up, we can't see the problems as obviously. So hold off on the cleaning until after your inspection, and then keep it clean for the very reasons that Kristi mentioned of being able to spot something that's out of place. The other thing that really catches my eye with rigging, particularly the old rod type counterweight carriages, is people will not tighten the hold down fasteners that hold the weights on the carriage. I'll see them stored 2-3 feet up above the weights, completely missing, or just laying there with the nut loose, not doing any good. If you ever have a runaway set and those things aren't tight, the counterweights can scatter away from the carriages and come raining down in 40-pound bricks.
You know, I just did an inspection 2 weeks ago, and someone had actually put all of the bricks on top of the nuts.
Yeah,
And
I've seen
it's
that.
like,
Wow.
Oh, geez.
I found them where the rings where the tightening bolts go through were installed, and the boss where the threaded hole was supposed to be had never been drilled out and threaded. So it had been that way for 30-40 years. They installed it without ever installing the threaded clamp nuts. And
you know, another one of my pet peeves is missing spreader plates.
Okay.
When people either aren't using them, or if they're not there at all. And it's like, you know, a couple of years ago at USITT, someone actually came out with, it's called a retro spreader. It's actually the most simple thing. It's just 2 pieces of metal that come together, and it's all $30. And it's like, you know, if you're not familiar with spreader plates, it's that keeps the bars together in between all the weights. So if you do have a runaway, you don't have weights raining down on you. And so they're just super important. And people just, they get in the way. They put them high, they put them low. They don't want to use them.
Yeah, the clip
Just like,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, and sometimes it's just simple things though. We're talking about the weights, and how many times do we walk up on catwalks and find that the weights are literally stacked
Higher,
so much
yeah.
higher than the toe board?
Yeah.
And then there's kids just leaning on them, and weights are falling. But you know, one of the things I think that we see the most, it's not so much about things being wrong, it's things that they know they're wrong, and it's like that for months and months and months, like buddy tie-offs on, you know, line sets, because the rope locks. They knew the rope locks needed to be adjusted, but you'll go in 6 months later and there's still buddy tie-offs holding those same line sets. And it's been a problem that just didn't get attended to. Sometimes it's just, they know what the problem is, they're aware the problem is there, but it just never gets remedied. And that's really what I think bothers us on my end, is going in these same schools and seeing the same problems for months and months and months that they're aware of, but don't ever repair them. I think that, again, is sort of, for us, is one of the biggest issues of we're talking about safety in theaters. It's more so about, I think in a lot of cases, directors are aware that the safety issues exist, but they don't necessarily either have the means or understand the process on how to get those things, or who to go to in terms of getting them repaired.
So, Paul, do you have anything you want to add?
Well, I wanted to kind of add on to Dan's point about it's a lot about what you hear. So he mentioned squeaking, but you can hear grinding noises or clattering. So it could be that the track that the counterweights don't ride in is off. And so that's making a banging noise that over time is degrading the shoes on those arbors. Or if you have a sloped roof, then you generally have lock blocks that are on a swivel, and sometimes those don't sit flat. So then the lift lines are rubbing on the arbor and you're degrading the wire rope over time. And those are all things that you can hear, and it's key to be able to use multiple people to identify where are those noises coming from, because that will ultimately lead you to the source of a future problem.
Right. Now I know the quick answer to the question that I'm about to ask, but I want to see if I can dive a little deeper in this, because I came from a space of 7 years of just dead hung soft goods, and somebody sitting at this table came to my space and said the tracks that you have are not rated for the curtains that you have. This was prior to that person coming to my space. His name rhymes with Saul. But I did not know that. You know, I was not, because they're dead hung, they're 20 feet in the air, maybe taller in some cases. And so I'm not able to, because we didn't have a one-man lift, you know, there was really no way of getting up there to check other than an educated eye coming in to see those issues. So for an educator that is in their space, that either might be in their first or second year in that space, not necessarily in teaching, what do you recommend for them? Do you just have to immediately call the professional eye to come in and say, here are your issues? And this will lead into the advocacy conversation that we can have right after this. But if anybody wants to jump in and kind of speak on those kind of dead hung situations as well.
I'll speak into that. Is that many of the dead hung situations, particularly in older schools, battens and drapery tracks were hung with what we call dog chain or twisted wire chain. It's just, it was never load rated. It was never intended for hanging things. And that stuff's been sitting up in the ceiling, rusting for the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years. These facilities, if you see dog chain holding up your rigging, you need a rigging inspection. That's one of the keys.
More common than you think.
Yeah,
it is, and it's really dangerous, because if that thing ever gets a load snagged on it, some other piece of scenery that somebody's moving around, it can literally just pull those chain links apart, particularly when they're rusted. So those are really a giveaway that something hasn't ever been attended to, because we quit using dog chain in professional consulting industry, you know, a good 30 years ago, 40 years ago. I mean, it's not a new problem, a recent thing. It's been addressed a long time back.
Well, to that said, I do know one contractor that still does it, and I've told him not to, but he still does.
It's easy.
Does his name rhyme with Saul? Anyway.
No.
Well, you asked about what a new teacher can do in their space, and a new teacher probably doesn't have the budget to pull one of us in right away. But your fire marshal would be happy to come in and take a walkthrough with you.
Right.
And oftentimes they will know, sometimes they won't know, but they're going to point out the things that they're aware of. And sometimes that's enough to give you the leverage to get one of us to come in.
I'm actually glad you brought that up, because that raises up a different issue. And we get this phone call a lot. A lot of directors, a lot of fine arts directors and coordinators are afraid to call the fire marshal out of fear that if the fire marshal comes in, they're gonna red flag some items. It's gonna cause that theater to shut down. Now, rightfully so, the theater shouldn't be operating unsafely, but that is a common fear. We hear that a lot. That they're afraid as a contractor, I might go in because of something I've seen and call the fire marshal. That has been talked about quite a bit, and I think, you know, I don't know if they're how, again, because I've never been a theater educator, never been in that situation. I don't know what the protocol is there for how to get somebody to come look without, you know, necessarily losing their performance space. It's happened.
I've called up the fire marshal and said, I would like a get out of jail free card visit. I'd like you to come in and help me so I can help to make this place be in compliance.
Excellent answer.
And they've been fabulous about it. They want the facility to be safe. Because if I say, I just put my head in the sand, I thought maybe that might have been unsafe, but I wasn't really sure, and something happens, then I'm definitely liable, because I thought there might have been an issue and I did not do what a prudent, responsible person would do. You know, as teachers, you have an in loco parentis responsibility to your students. That's greater than I'm just a person off the street responsibility. So if you have any inkling that there might be something wrong, let your administration know, let your fire marshal know, let one of us know. You know, I can't always do it, but I've stopped by a place for 20 minutes and said, yeah, we need to take a closer look at this, or have your fire marshal come in and write this up, because we all want safe workplaces for us and safe places for our kids to go to school.
Yeah.
That said, I think sometimes fire marshals are overrated in the sense that they're going to notice everything. I've gone through numerous facilities where people, where there was just all kinds of fire code related things and other safety issues. And somebody would say, well, my fire marshal was just here last month and he didn't say anything. So fire marshals don't understand theater and they don't always see what's going on. And if you hear that somebody from further up your administration say, oh, the fire marshal was here and he said everything's okay, it is largely, to me, a meaningless statement because they don't understand theater. They don't understand how it's used and how it's abused. You need to be proactive. Certainly inviting them in is a good gesture. And there's a lot of good excuses to invite them in because they need to know how to rescue somebody from your gridiron. And it's an informative trip for them. They need to know if somebody's injured up on a catwalk somewhere, how do you get there? Because that's where some people get hurt lots of times. Yeah. And if the fire department, rescue people don't know how to get to the victim, they have a very difficult time achieving that goal. Dan, go ahead.
Yeah, Dan, did you have something you wanted to add? I saw you kind of.
I was going to say, and OSHA will do it too. They will do a consultative walkthrough and say, well, here's all the things that need improvement. Now they expect you to go through and do it after the fact, but they won't fine you or anything like that. And they'll tell you, okay, here's all the things that we want you to work on. And they really will do that for free upon invitation. They like to be asked. Because they do want to prevent accidents and injuries. Now, if 2 years goes by and you don't do it, and then you have a fatality or something for some reason, and then they say, well, 2 years ago on your consultative walkthrough, we said you need to fix this and you didn't, you might be in a little bit of trouble. But that said, they'll show up, they'll let you know for free what you need done.
Yeah, and I do want to add in, as somebody that's gone from that's now inhabited a couple of schools as an educator, if that does happen, if OSHA comes in, if the fire marshal comes in and they have addressed you and the issues that you need to fix and address, if you leave that summer for another school, you are still liable for when that person came in, that inspector came in to check, and your administration will, or former administration in this case, will still hunt you down. I'm not speaking from experience. I'm just telling you that I know that they can and will do that. So it's not one of these issues, because I do know some educators that have left poor situations when it comes to their structure, partially because their structure was poor. That might have been a catalyst for them leaving, and they are still liable if they did have an inspector come through the space at some point during their tenure. So just throwing that out there. Go ahead.
Something else that the audience may not understand, but many of us are hired by lawyers as expert witnesses in an injury case.
Sure.
And they ask us to go in and objectively look at all the circumstances. And it's really eye-opening, the experience that we have seeing what caused different tragedies. And you don't always recognize right up front what may have set that off. And frequently in my experience is that there have been buildings constructed, brand new buildings. People haven't been in them but a week and somebody will be injured seriously. And you trace back through all of the process, and architects, engineers, constructors, building inspectors, and even the owner have all contributed to that accident by not having the building properly constructed in the first place. So if you come into a building and you feel like something's not safe, there's a ladder or hatchway that's exposed without guards, there's catwalk railings are too open, other, fall injury situations, not proper work lighting, not proper run or show lighting. This is where accidents happen. And you need to address this, there are minimum illumination levels, minimum standards for railings and catwalks and ladders, and that these things need to be built to those standards. Even if you're not an OSHA compliant or an OSHA governed area of your school, the contractor still had to make it OSHA compliant as he built it. You get the benefit of his responsibility. So there's really never an excuse for these things to go by, but they regularly happen.
Right. So Erich, I want to touch on one thing that to kind of wrap up the consulting and who should come in and out of your space and all that stuff by kind of touching on the difference between a salesperson and an independent contractor or an independent consultant, excuse me. And I want you to speak on that. And then if anybody wants to, because we have a few, if anybody wants to speak on that after you are done.
Our largest concern is always, as we're doing design work, is for the benefit of the owner. It's not always for the benefit of the administration, even though it is, but they don't understand that. But we're trying to get the owner a working theater space that's safe. And we don't sell equipment. We don't install equipment. We don't wrench on equipment. So what we are trying to do is give them tools to produce their shows. And when we come in, we don't have an agenda where I've got a bunch of lighting instruments or rigging equipment that's in my back stock and I need to move it. There is an inclination, at least from our perspective, that when salespeople come in from a contractor, is that they may recommend things, but it's not necessarily an altruistic recommendation, because they may want to move some product that they have that they need to get rid of, or they just want to sell equipment. And the recommendations we see sometimes from contractors and salespeople are not always aligned with what the owner needs in the bigger picture. Part of that comes from contractors being very specific in their focus. They are a lighting person or a rigging person or a drapery person, but they don't look at the whole big picture. A consultant is generally knowledgeable about all of the operations inside the theater, the electrical things, the sound system, acoustics, fire protection, all these different pieces. So whenever we see a problem, we look at it in the context of all these systems, not just one system. So we see situations where somebody comes in and they see one little problem, they got one little answer, but they're not looking at the big picture. And also they're not looking for convenience for them, or they are looking for convenience for the salesperson. They're not looking at the convenience for the owner. One of these things that we find are missing fly galleries. You'll go in and there's a locking rail, but there's no loading galleries, or the loading gallery is in the wrong place. Well, putting a loading gallery in is a rather expensive process. You got to get a structural engineer and structural contractors to install these things, and it's all got to get designed in a theater context. And a contractor is generally reluctant to bring up a big ticket item that they're not making money on. The structural guy and the structural engineer, they're going to make more money on it than the contractor is. But that is what's needed to make the fly system safe, is a safe place to load the weights. I see a lot of theaters where they left out the loading galleries, and I was like, why did they leave them out? So, well, we were saving money. Well, at what expense? So we're very cautious about looking at the big picture of why something needs changed, and not just the focused little picture.
Well,
One of my
to that point, Erich, I think you raised something that's valid. Because I'm a contractor and I'm on that side of the fence, we see that every day. We do see the contractors come in. And again, it's everything you said. I think that what should happen there, what it boils down to is where the relationship between the district or the director and your contractor is so important, right? Because, you might have a contractor who might want to sell something to get more margin on that's not as safe or accurate for the project. But I know that in our relationship with those schools and those theaters, that if I do that, they've got my cell phone. I'm on the hook. If something happens there, they're going to call me. It's going to be out of my pocket to go back and make that remedy. I'm going to have to eat the cost of that fix. It's so important for school districts, for directors to know who their contractor is, who they're dealing with, have a relationship with them, so that they feel like, as a contractor, I'm looking out for their best interest. Where we see that happen the most is with, and this happens a lot with design build because it's public bid, where you've got a contractor coming in and they've never had a relationship. They don't know that contractor. They come in from somewhere outside of their region where the school is being built. And it's difficult at that point because you don't have a relationship. You can't go to that person and get the remedy after it's done. But just that, for me, I think that's hugely important. We preach that to the directors and the fine arts directors and the superintendents, the districts over and over again to make sure you're doing business with a contractor that you know has your best interest in mind.
I fully agree with that. The bid process can really muddy the waters, particularly with contractors that are a long way from home. That doesn't mean they're a bad contractor, but it is a relationship issue. One of the problems that arises with design builds, if a contractor designs something and then another contractor bids on it, then a question comes up about substitutions and is the installation proper? It leaves the designer that didn't get the contract in the seat of being the judge of, is that right? Or is that okay to do that? Or will they even spend the time to answer that question since they didn't get the bid? And that leaves the school district trying to make a decision about a technical item that they largely don't know anything about. So you can put yourself in a bind by not having an impartial judge to referee the construction process.
And you can waste a lot of money that way. One of my pet peeves is the one size fits all lighting package. That's not true. Theaters are not built the same way.
Right.
So don't tell me that this $250,000 package with this $10,000 lighting board is what I need for this small incandescent theater that would be just fine with this $3,000 lighting board. It's frustrating for me as a taxpayer too, because I see the money that's being wasted that could be spent on a loading bridge or on something else that would make that facility better and more educationally sound.
Oh, man, I could go on for hours about what Kristi just said.
Another podcast.
Speaking as someone that just left a school that replaced their curtains 2 years after replacing their curtains because the bond said to do so.
Oh,
I digress.
Yeah.
Anyway,
yeah.
Paul, do you have anything you want to add to that particular topic?
I mean, I feel like Erich have
Yeah, Eric
addressed the meat of it. Just to reiterate what Erich friend has said. Yeah, it's contractors generally come in with an agenda. They have equipment to sell, or they have certain equipment relationships, and those are not always the best tools for the job. And that's where consultants like Erich and Dan and Kristi and myself can make an equipment agnostic, is how we define it, decision for you, or recommendation for equipment in your space. Because as Erich said, we don't have a skin in the game. We want what's best for you. We are an end user advocate to make sure that you get the best system. And one thing that I can say from my own personal experience is, if you are going through the process where you need something done and that work is going to go out on a bid, some people are afraid to engage consultants because of the cost, the additional cost on top of just the equipment. But generally speaking, your equipment costs go down because we don't just specify one thing. So it ends up in a wash, or you still end up spending less money because now it's a competitive bid instead of a design build where you're locked into whatever that contractor is trying to offload that day.
Yeah, and it speaks to the point of there's a school not too far from where we're sitting right now that has probably a solid dozen or 2 dozen single cell LED cyc lights sitting in a catwalk because they don't need them. They already have enough cyc lights. Well, that's $15,000 of equipment that could have gone, allocated to another spot in that school. So again, that's a topic that we could probably sit and discuss for, share stories here. Dan, you haven't contributed to this specific topic. Do you have anything you want to add, or is everything?
Well, first, I think that it's really important for teachers, especially, to understand the process for procurement in their district. And it's going to be different in every district. That's okay. But knowing what the plans are, what the specs are, what should be in the bid package, what you can change in the front end, what you can't change, what subject matter you shouldn't touch versus all the district policy that you can absolutely change unless the district doesn't want you to. Kind of knowing that process and the steps. I don't think very many teachers know about it, and they should. They need to know what good specs are and what that looks like. And if you don't know, or if you've not seen a spec package, you can call any of us up. We can give them to you, or a quick Google search with any of the consultant names will probably bring one up. Spend some time reading bid packages of other schools, other industries even, just to get the process down and to learn what is in a good package. But the rule of thumb that I use is when I put plans and specs together, if I can answer as many questions as possible and make as many decisions for my integrators so that they don't have to come back and say, do you want this light switch to be black or white? Or do you want light A or light B? If I can say as much as I can so they don't have to come back and ask questions, then what it gives them the ability to do is sharpen their pencil, because they say, hey, I don't have to throw money at something because I know what's expected of me. The other thing that can be done too, hiring a consultant, is we can register projects with manufacturers and get master quotes. That means all of my vendors get the exact same pricing from the manufacturer, but it also means the manufacturer knows the equipment's coming and you're able to jump the line in purchasing a little bit because they know about it. A lot of times manufacturers will just say, okay, first in, first out. And when the integrator submits the PO, you go in line, and when we get the chips, we'll send it out. Well, if you have a consultant, they might make it a little bit earlier. There's a very big AV supplier that's starting to do that, as are a few others. So if your project's on a timeline, it's going to start being a real big asset to bring a consultant in.
Good, thank you. So I want to move on to a big topic, another big topic, and then we might touch on some smaller ones if we have time. But I want to move on to advocacy, to administration, to school boards, to superintendents, to just in-house principals and assistant principals. We have loosely touched on some things with talking about if you bring in a fire marshal, that can maybe open a door to go talk to a principal about bigger issues and get some backing and maybe hopefully some financial backing as well to fix certain issues. Advocacy is a huge topic. At least I know in the state of Texas, it's a big topic. We have advocacy networks that go to Capitol Hill and in Austin that just try to get theater to be more in the front, in the foreground rather than in the background for students and for educators. So I want to start at this table first, and then we'll go to my Zoomers, if you will. I hope you don't mind that term, not the derogatory term, the Zoomers, if you. But Erich, we have had conversations about advocating to fine arts directors and who don't need necessarily a lot of advocating. Some do, because they might not be theater background affiliated. But what is kind of the first step, in your opinion? And we can build on the first step. First step doesn't need to be the answer for everybody, unless you want to add to what he says. But what is sort of the first step that you think a theater educator or even a fine arts director that might have a theater background should take in order to get issues resolved, or make sure that they are taking care of, the bed is made, so to speak, for their department?
We spent the last few years spending a lot of time with fine arts directors and fine arts coordinators. And we hear the same thing over and over again. I think it starts with, we'll sit down with fine arts directors and they'll tell us, we go to the directors every year and we say, look, what vendors do you want to use? If you have capital outlay, where do you want to put it? What are the things you need? And over again, those fine arts directors come back and say they give us nothing. The directors don't tell us what they need. They don't know. And so because that information is not put out there, nothing ever gets done. I think that it really starts with communication between the directors and the fine arts coordinator, fine arts directors, saying, hey, look, here's the problems we're having. Make a laundry list. Say, these are the things that happen over and over and over again. Here's the things that we have problems with over and over and over again. I think that also is the case in terms of, we were talking a little bit about some of these smaller districts, right, that are not 6A or 5A, they're 3A and they're 4A, and bond gets approved and they're about to get a new facility. The directors, are simply sort of left in the dark about what is going to happen, what's coming in that renovation. And, we don't talk a whole lot about it, but in a lot of cases, I'm glad we have a lot of consultants in the room. And Paul's in a unique position because he worked for one of the largest installers really in the world. And now being on the other side of that, being the consultant, in a lot of cases, those contractors are playing the role of the consultant and they're playing the role of the installer. And in some cases, that leaves the director and the fine arts director and the construction person at the district sort of out of the loop as to sort of what's happening. I don't want to go off topic, but because we have consultants on the feed, and I think the audience wants to hear it, is if a director were to call a consultant and say, hey, look, there's a design build going on and I have no idea what's happening, and there's no consultant being brought in by the architect. And in a lot of cases, it's a copy and paste type plan. Do consultants, when they get that phone call, what is that action that you take as a consultant? Do you call the district? Do you call the architect and say, hey, look, I just know there's not a consultant on this particular project? Is that something that consultants even entertain? You're not being brought in to consult that project, but you know that there's a facility being built that does not have a consultant as part of the package. As a consultant, do you take that phone call? Do you make a phone call to the architect and say, hey, there's no consultant here? Or does the district have to say, we want to consult, we want to hire you? And is that the only way that sort of goes?
So I will tell you that sometimes, as much as the district would like to hire a consultant, they're not willing to include a fee for that service. And so that's why you see a lot of copy and paste schools, because we've already paid for this design and we don't have to get it again.
Do it again.
I mean, we're always willing to help people who call and have questions. I mean, we're happy to entertain that. And I mean, some people may charge for it and some may not, but all of us here have talked a little bit about it. But yeah, end user advocacy is one of the most important things that we do. When a consultant is on the project, one of our main goals is to always make sure that the needs of the people who are going to be in that space are a part of every decision throughout the design process, because a lot of times those end users don't get a say. I mean, even though we will try to get them involved, that's not always possible. So that's where, an independent consultant maybe has that advantage that we care about what the end user needs and not anything else.
See, that's a good point. I think it's good for the directors to hear that the consultants are there for their benefit. And I think sometimes that they're not registering what the point of that consultant is and how that role is played inside of design build. I think it's so common now to have the contractor, which, as I understand it, Eric, friend, you can talk about this too. I believe the procurement law says that the contractor can't actually be the consultant. I believe there's a law that says that's actually not. Am I right on that?
You're muted, Eric.
It varies from state to state and district to district what the exact procurement laws are. But my bigger question to any administration is, I mean, they hire kitchen consultants, they hire playing field consultants for the football field, they hire parking lot consultants. Why would you not hire a consultant for a building that's $10 or $20 million portion of your construction? And to have to rely on an architect that is doesn't necessarily know theater, particularly the most recent and modern equipment for theaters and the way they're used today versus 10 or 20 years ago, is kind of irresponsible of the the district to do that. The advocacy to get a consultant online with a project is a difficult challenge. Initially, you need to convince the administration that this needs to happen, and they don't always understand what a consultant does. They confuse consultants with salespeople. They confuse consultants with directors, theater director. Well, the theater director can tell us what they need. No, they know what tools they'd like, but they don't know how to design the tools. Theater consultants are tool designers. We provide tools for everybody to do their job once the building's constructed. There's no expectation that somebody directing a show understands the intricacy of designing a sound system, a lighting system, or a rigging system, or room acoustics, or noise control, or any of these subject areas. They're very specific tasks and very specific skills to achieve a good building. The need to have an independent view of that is further reinforced in that the architects and engineers don't necessarily understand theater either. So they're going to choose things that it worked before, is what they say, when it didn't work before. They just think it did. Air conditioning designers will tend to design air handling systems that are noisy, like you might put in a gymnasium, thinking, well, it's just a big room. And they don't get that how quiet it needs to be, particularly with modern sound systems where a lot of recording and remote broadcasting is happening. The microphones pick up every little bit of noise from noisy air handling systems.
It's interesting you bring that up, Eric, because I don't think people realize how many design build projects from the theatrical standpoint are designed by the electrical engineer. I mean, we see that happen over and over and over again. Let me ask you this, in that case, where electrical engineers are copying, pasting, if you will, from the director's standpoint, if you're the director at the school, and I don't want to keep harping on this, I just think they need to sort of hear the answer. If there's not, if you don't have a consultant on the project, the director knows, the final director knows there is not a consultant on the project, but they have their drawings and they have their specifications and they have their equipment list. Do consultants take that phone call where they can say, here, can you just look over this? Is there a flat rate I can pay where you can look over this project and tell me what you think is either good or bad? I mean, because I would think at that point, at least I know the finance directors that we deal with would say, look, if that's a $2,500 service, we'll pay that to have somebody just look over the package, look over the drawings. Is that something that consultants entertain?
Yeah, we'd be happy to do that. It's whether there's any results from it still comes back to getting buy-in from the administration. You know, you can send the report to them and says, hey, this has got all these deficiencies, but largely the deficiencies that show up are major design deficiencies, not minor design deficiencies. The habit of mechanical engineers designing poor sound air conditioning systems and electrical engineers relying on manufacturers' rep to design the lighting. Few electrical engineers actually design lighting systems. They just pass the task off to a manufacturer's rep. So a representative. So they're not actually doing the work. They're relying on somebody else to do the work for free. But when you get something for free, the value's for free. You know, you're not getting paid service, knowledgeable support there. So in hiring an independent consultant, we're trying to give you more than just what a manufacturer will say, oh, you need this package A or package B. We're looking specifically at that building and those circumstances. And it's not a real simple process. We can review things, but the results, unless there's some buy-in from the administration, it's very difficult. We're more than happy to even have a meeting with the administration. I've done in the last 2-3 months, got it, at least a dozen Zoom meetings with administrators that are looking at doing repairs to their buildings and help them understand what we do and how it's different. And sometimes you see the light bulb come on and sometimes it's in one ear and out the other.
Well, but you hit it on the head. That's the issue, is that in some cases, the director or the finance director doesn't have the ammo. They don't have the evidence that they need to be able to get that buy-in by the district. And in some cases, if a consultant takes the phone call, has a flat rate and says, hey, look, if you can save a lot of money here, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It would make more sense if you do it this way. Now, for this flat rate, they've got the ammo that they can go to the district, they can go to the architect and say, we really think this consultant needs to be brought on. I think if directors hear that, they know that there is a tool that they can use, only because there are so many design builds, so many buildings that we go into after the fact, after they're built, and directors and finance coordinators and finance directors are basically saying, this is not at all what we thought we were going to get. We just feel like this was not done and this never happened and this wasn't brought up. And having that tool, having the ability for a director to know that it might not be the most expensive thing in the world to be able to call a consultant, knowing there's not one on the project, and say, can you look over this? And might give them the information that they need to be able to get those things remedied before the building is built.
One of the things that I would encounter a lot is you've got an architect comes in and goes, oh, we're going to design you a theater, and it's going to be like this one down the street from in another district. And so the administrator from your district goes down and looks at the building in the other district, and that administrator pops his suspenders and goes, this is just wonderful. And even if they get the theater person in that other facility to give some input, that theater person is very reluctant to say anything negative about their theater in front of the other administrator. They're going to pop their suspenders too and go, our theater's wonderful, as they're grimacing with all the problems that they have. And so you've got reinforcement from one person to the next that this was a good idea, this theater that was a disaster. And so everybody's on board with, let's build one just like that. And the one just like that is a waste of money. So it's getting people to get down to the nitty gritty and not be afraid to say, oh, this other theater is really pretty, but it's not functional. And, give them a list of why it's not functional. Help them understand that what they're building is not about pretty, but it's about functionality.
Well, and that, even if you're going to this, we're going to build it just like this school down the street. That school could be 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. Well, all that technology is probably outdated and needs new systems anyway. So even if they built it exactly like that, you may not even be able to get some of those components anymore.
We had that exact thing happen. A district wanted to build a new high school, just like the one they built 15 years before, which had been designed 20 years before. And there's technology that you couldn't even buy the technology. And so they were wanting to make it equal to the other school. Instead of investing in the old school and bringing it up to speed, they wanted to dumb down the new school to a technology that didn't even exist anymore.
Dan, did you just put the background of the school that Erich was referencing?
So this one is one that it's kind of one I use tongue in cheek. And what was the first thing that you notice when you look at it?
Color, yes.
Well, okay, aside from the color.
For me.
I'll give you a hint. Something's not the same.
Rectangles.
Yeah.
Your walls are completely different.
Yeah.
Not only that, you're gonna love this one. The architect did not want things to be symmetrical. So the lights, you take where it should be, one's here, one's here. They moved them forward and they moved them backwards. So now to have your same position, you actually have to have two different barrels in your lights to have the two different lenses. And it's all this wood and like all this pretty surfaces and all that, but you built it to be a regional rep theater and a corporate theater, but a regional rep theater. And you made it really challenging for all these MFA students who are now designing for the space. But you know what? They're going to learn acoustics. They're going to learn lighting. They're going to learn all this stuff really well because of all these challenges you just threw at them.
I only see yellow. I mean, I heard everything you said, Dan, but all I see is yellow.
This was not my project, by the way.
That exemplifies a big problem with architects is they don't understand the interior aesthetic of a theater. And so they pick all kinds of color things. I'm looking at that picture and I'm seeing like 30 different things that were wrong with the color, not just one.
Yeah.
They don't get color schemes relative to theaters. And that's how we end up with white theaters and black theaters and yellow theaters instead of things that work.
So Kristi, you were, so you about to
Yeah,
say something?
it's not even the theatrical thing sometimes, it's how we use the related spaces. Like I've been working with a high school that had one room for a dressing room. Hello, you need at least 3 in this time, and one bathroom facility backstage for whomever they might have, which was also supposed to be the room that they used for hand washing laundry. There was no washing machine. They had no paint sink, no slop sink, nothing like that for the use of the space. And so the school is having to go back, the brand new building, and retrofit all of these things at a much higher cost than if they'd had somebody come in and look at the entirety of what the theater needs to use in order to be functional.
Okay.
The support space design is very important, and it's not just, doesn't stop at the edge of the playing area.
Yeah.
It's all
I-
backstage and substitutes.
I was talking to an architect, and he was embarking on a new high school design and wanted the theater to be the crown jewel of the high school. And his idea for crown jewel was put the theater in the dead center of the building. And he wanted your athletics out this side, a performing arts wing, your classrooms, your cafeteria, and your library, like all the stuff surrounding your theater. And I looked at him and I said, how are you going to load in a show? And he's like, oh.
Landlocked.
Yeah, you carry it. So let's go. Yeah. Lots of cards. So going back to the advocacy thing, and I appreciate all that conversation. But I do want to make sure that we hit on advocating for your program. And we have. I mean, the last hour plus that we've been talking, we've been there have been nuggets of this is how you need to or these are the tools you need to advocate. But I want to go back to that kind of first step, if you will, of where do you start? Because the advocacy looks different everywhere you go, from school to school, from district to district, state to state. Everywhere you go, you don't know who you need to advocate to necessarily in every space. And you might think you're advocating to the right person, but that person has no pull. And so you've just wasted your time. So where do you start? And Kristi, I know you have a lot of passion behind this. So we'll go to you to kind of get the ball rolling there. And then I've got one more question to wrap things up, and then we'll go to happy hour. So go ahead.
Well, I don't think it's ever a waste of time, because you never know when you're talking to somebody who's going to talk to somebody else who's going to talk to somebody else, and you'll eventually get to the right person. The old saying is telephone, telegraph, tell a woman. So talk to the women. But what I oftentimes hear is you can't make a living at this. That's what I was told when I was in high school. That's why I didn't study theater in college. And I make a very good living at this. And I know many people who are earning well into 6 figures doing this. And I know a lot of people that are earning a decent middle wage income, not middle-aged, middle class income. Yes, you can pay your bills, you can raise your children on it. And you get to travel, and you get to do all sorts of things that people don't generally think of when they think of stagehand, AV technician, the folks who are working with all of this equipment. And it is, as the saying goes, marketable skills. COVID happened and our industry shut down. And a lot of our members, a lot of the people that work in this industry found work using those skills in allied trades, whether it was in construction or, like I said, I work for an AV integrator during the day, and I was home for a couple of weeks and then got the phone call back, hey, Zoom, everybody needs Zoom equipment. How fast can you get back here? So the fact that we're able to use this as a viable career path is not often recognized. So I start with that. Did you know that this is a really good job and these skills can be used in a variety of jobs? Did you know that the ability to sew, which we do in our costume classes, is important for a surgeon?
Mm-hmm.
Think about those ways that these same skills are used in a variety of crafts. Great. Now, these high school kids, I want to have these skills so that they can get a job. And if it's not a job, if it's a avocation or they're serving in their house of worship, all of those are good things too. This is a place where the electrons don't care what color you are, what race you are, what age you are, if you only have one leg. All they care about is, can you move the fader? Can you hit the go button at the right time? Can you take a look at those lights and make them look great? And there's a place for this in this theater world for absolutely everybody. So when I talk to people about theater education, and as you can tell, yes, I am passionate about this, that's what I say. This is a place where absolutely every student in your school can shine. Might not be doing exactly what the other people are doing. It's not competitive, it's collaborative. It is a chance to experience things. It's a chance to try things. It's a chance to fail and learn from your failure. And my heart goes out to my fellow teaching colleagues, K-12, because most often it's a one-person show, and we are asking them to do what in the professional world would be a dozen or more people. We're asking them to be an authority on lighting and sound and video and rigging and scenic construction and makeup and hair and oh, by the way, and then acting methods, plus handling the box office and everything else. And it is just more than one individual can happen. So when I talk to school boards, when I talk to parent groups, I say, please get your community involved. This can be and will be a source of pride for everybody in your city. Don't say we can't do it. Don't say we don't have enough money. The money will come. Might not be as fast as you want it to be, but there are a lot of inexpensive things we can do. You can spend your money wisely and get good return on your investment. That's what you want. You want a safe, healthy place where students can come, learn, share, the community can come and enjoy the fruits of their labor.
I would second what she said. There's other industries that are parallel to ours, particularly the film industry. If you get somebody to sit down and watch all of the credits to a major Hollywood production, you take a movie like Dune, and it takes you 10 minutes to watch the credits on that. And there's thousands of people on that staff, and every one of them brought home the bacon. The skills that you get in a theater environment, whether they're acting or technical or management, all of them go into other industries: the theme park industry, the nightclub industry, the tour industry, the film industry, the television industry. There are thousands of jobs out there they need highly skilled people for. These are bring the bacon home jobs.
So this background here, which I put back up, I obviously picked for a particular reason. This was one room out of the building that had 40 conference rooms that I did. It was a $250 million building. And if you look at this picture, it's obviously corporate. It's not high school theater. It has a video wall, has source 4 lighting, has audio, has all of the components that you use in a high school theater, but very much for a corporate. Now, something very interesting about this space though, the primary users of this exact space are the people who I did high school theater with 20 years ago when I was in high school. And their only opportunity to learn stage lighting was in high school. And now they're using it every day because they're selling their technology services for this company. It's all building the foundation that you build at the high school level percolates 20 years later in ways you can't even envision. And this space here is a theater. It gave me a living while I built it, and now it's giving my friends a living while they use it. And we were all in the exact same theater. Oak Park High School, Shelley Blay was our teacher. Jim Hammer was there for a while. There's a group of about 20 of us, and at least 8 of them are all in the same team using the space every day. It was actually really kind of fun at the high school reunion when I said, oh yeah, I built that. Then they told me everything they liked and they didn't. That was kind of fun. One girl wanted to go out and go, oh yeah, I got a brochure on the building that we give our clients. I'm like, I'm here to drink and party with my friends. I'm not here to anyway, yeah, it's if you have a quality program at the K-12 level, you're teaching them foundational skills that they can carry through. I mentioned earlier, I got started with the union when I was a junior. I'm still there. I'm probably going to be at the arena on Saturday doing a load-in for a show. not many jobs you can do at age 17 that you're still wanting to do at age 39.
I'm twice that and I still want to do the jobs.
Yeah.
Paul, Eric, do you have anything you want to add to that?
So I guess the thing I was going to say is you were asking about first steps for advocacy.
Yeah.
If you're looking for people to give you information on your system, we've been a little derogatory towards contractors this talk, but any contractor that has worked in your space is probably going to have put their name somewhere on the equipment in the building. So if you're just trying to figure out what do I have, because I don't know anything, you can generally find that contractor's number and call them, and they have documentation for your space. So if you need to know, at the very least, what's in my space so I can start the process of figuring out how to make improvements, you can always look for that information and call those contractors up.
Yeah.
All right, here, I'm going to give you a little bit of free consulting here because everybody likes it. This is something that I put in my specs and it's been really popular. At the top of every single AV rack, it's really popular to put a contractor plate that has their contact info. I go a step further. I cut it in half. The left half is my information as the designer. The right half is the contractor's information with a help desk number. If the school has a district help desk number, that goes on it as well. Then it's really popular to have either Google Drive, SharePoint, some similar service. I use a label maker, or actually the contractor does because I make them do it, but they put the project number and a QR code. The QR code takes you to a folder on the district's website, and in that folder is your as-built, your programming code, your specs, your plans, all of the closeout documentation delivered by the contractor, approved by the consultant, delivered to the owner at the end of a project, and then it is maintained by the end user. But every time the contractor comes on to do an update, you throw a folder, you add a date, you put the updated code in, and now you have version control. And so, okay, we had our contractor out. They updated the system. You've got the current code, you've got the previous code all right there. So if there's a problem, you can reload the previous version. Anybody can walk up who's authenticated into your network. They can scan it with their phone. They can access it with a computer, all right there, just from a sticker on the rack. And when you have teachers change, administrators change, your facility department come in, if you're all engaged in the same system and everybody's maintaining it, you'll never have to go chasing down the code for your light switch.
Well, all right. Well, let's wrap it up with this. This again, what I'm about to ask could be another couple hours of a conversation, but I want you to try really hard. I have a master's of education. That's me beeping right now. That's me honking to my own horn. And one of the biggest things they taught us in this program was be succinct. Okay, so I'm going to ask a question where you have to be succinct. Okay, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so all right, because we could all sit here and chit chat all day like I'm doing right now. I want you to think of one, and I'll give my first example that we kind of mentioned off before we started recording. I want you to think of one common issue that is a thread that you see when you walk into a space that could be relatively easily fixed or repaired when you walk in. Something that an educator that is walking into their space for the first time might put their eye on, put their hand on to see if they can't get it fixed rather quickly. I don't want, well, there's no fly loft, that one, although a problem, that's not a quick fix. Although, some people might just say, well, build an 8-foot tall platform. I don't know. I'm kidding, Eric. Please don't hurt me. But my example is I've walked into many spaces because my lighting or my background is lighting, and I will help with lighting, and I'll go immediately to a pipe on a catwalk or on a fly system, and the light itself is just hand tightened, and it immediately can pop right off. Sometimes with, sometimes without a safety cable. Obviously, one is more detrimental than the other. But that is my quick fix, something that a lot of educators can just easily, just quickly go about and check to see if they can fix that. And it's free to do that. So who wants to go first? I'll throw it out there. Who wants to kind of throw their first one out? Because I know some of you are trying to right now think, what's one
Oh,
that I
no,
want to talk about?
I got hundreds. I'll go
exactly.
first. I have no problem there.
Okay.
I think for us, it's because we go into so many schools as the service company. We're going in as a service call. And I mean, every school we get, well, not every school, but so many we go into, it's just the issue of broken connectors on the raceways, broken connectors on the fixtures. These are energized. These are kids who are grabbing these connectors, especially stage pins where the top flap is off, doesn't exist. They're grabbing that connector, it's energized, they're plugging them in. The risk of shock and electrocution, it's nonstop. We see it, in just about every school that we go into.
Okay, good. Wait, thank you for being succinct, Eric. Does anybody want to go next?
Change the
next.
light bulbs.
Okay, changing bulbs and lamps.
Yeah, when you turn the work lights on, it should be bright enough that you can safely walk across your stage. So change the light bulbs.
Okay, good. Thank you, Dan.
Mine's
We don't
gonna
have,
be-
we don't,
oh, go
we don't
ahead.
have to do lighting. I was just going to say, we don't all have to, it can be non-lighting related. It can be, don't use red paint. Anyway, I don't know. Looks like blood. Kristi, do you want to go?
Sure. My thing is to have a qualified, going back to OSHA, which was where we started all this, to have a qualified, competent, authorized person in every venue who gives a damn.
Right.
Somebody who actually cares, who will keep an eye on what's going on, who will make sure that the students are doing safe things, who will make sure that the things that need to be locked up are locked up. And it all comes down to having one individual in charge saying, the buck stops with me. I'm going to make this happen.
Great. Paul?
My item is related to fire protection, and that is actually treating all of the flammable objects on a stage with fire retardant. It's been in the code books for like 115 years now.
Yeah.
It's not new. It's not a new thing at all. Just go buy the Roscoe Flamex or the other brands and treat the wood and the fabrics and the plastics and the foams and the everything. There's no excuse for not buying it, and it's required by law.
Yep. Paul, you want to wrap us up with yours?
Sure.
Better be good.
Okay. I would say you're talking about things that are quick and easy fix.
Yep.
So if you have a counterweight rigging system, we talked a little bit earlier about spreader plates. If you have a counterweight rigging system and they are not already, you need to indicate the counterweights that are specifically to balance just the pipe itself. Typically in our specifications, and I think I can say this for everybody on the call, we'll note that those bricks need to be painted red or some other color to indicate this is the batten weight. It should always be on the arbor.
Don't take these off.
Don't take these off.
Yeah, good. Great. Does anybody have anything super important that they want to make sure that is put on this recording so that educators and teachers don't have questions? Or we're gonna supply your emails, not your phone numbers, your emails in the description, so that if they do want to get a hold of you, and Kristi already kind of broke it down, the north, central, south geographies for you guys. But if there's anything that you guys want for the record to be put on here, I would love for you to speak now. Otherwise, I will wrap it up. Go ahead, Dan. I see you.
Yeah. So while we did talk about the difference between consultants and integrators earlier, USITT does have the rigging inspection program for integrators to come into your space and inspect, and they'll give you a grant. I think at one point it was $1,200. I don't know what it currently is, but it should cover the cost of a inspection at least before travel. There is deadlines, all that stuff, but whenever the next round is, throw your name in the hat, see if you can get an inspector in. And if you have had one, it's been the same person for year after year after year, have a different set of eyeballs come in and inspect it. Erich and I are going to give you two very similar but slightly different reports because we're two different individuals. So get it inspected annually and apply for the grant if you don't have the funds to do it.
Yep.
Yeah, I just want to jump in real quick and say the other thing that I frequently don't see is an emergency action plan. Have a plan for when something happens in your venue to be able to get your audience who've never been in your venue before, who haven't had ALICE training, who don't know where the safe places are to go. Have a plan in case something happens to get them out safely. Know what you're going to do with your kids and your volunteers.
And I think all four of us can do those for you.
Yep.
Yep.
And they're not the same plan. A fire situation is different than a weather situation, different than a shooter situation. You need to have specific plans for specific circumstances.
I don't talk about hurricane in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Well, a weather condition. That's why I generalize it. We have tornadoes in some places and hurricanes in others.
Yeah. Don't call Kristi for your hurricane plan. Yeah. Right. All right. Well, great. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you for your time. I know time is valuable, especially right now as we're, getting caught up, if you will, in the entertainment industry from the last couple of years as it's thundering finally outside. Thank you, Drought. But I want to thank you guys for being here, for giving up part of your day. Erich for hosting, and the Techland studios. I almost threw a joking sponsor on there, but I won't do that. But it was really nice to kind of get to know you guys and get to talk with you guys. Paul, thanks for being here, taking time out of your day as well. That's it. I'll just wrap up with that. I appreciate you. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having
Thank you.
us.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.